Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episodes and we have very interesting session, especially on climate change. We have our special guest, Mr. Akku Chaudhary. Can you hear me, Mr. Akku Chaudhary? Anyway, we have Professor Donald.
Yeah, I can.
Yes,
Can you hear
we
me?
have Professor Donalds. He's an expert on innovations and he has very good contribution in academia. Dr. William, he become big popular of World Talent Economy forums with his policy and policy level discussions. Even yesterday, we get calls from different developing nations that how they can communicate with Dr. Williams. We have Alex. He is always very energetic, very powerful for World Talent Economy forums. He has a lot of contributions in climate change. And we have our best friend, Mr. Cart. He is actually big inspiration for World Talent Economy forums. How he work from his place. This is very good inspiration for our youth community, and you should learn how he survive, how he contributing for the technology and the new innovations. And if possible, Mr. Akku Chaudhary, uh, he is trying to join, but I think he has some internet issues from Nepal, and he is doing really great contributions in Himalayas. He is developing his own. He's a big climate activist. He built up his own farmhouse and everything he grew from zero. Actually, he developed Bangladesh as a freedom fighters. He developed one of the largest corporations, as well as one of the big foundations for the freedom fighters as well. Very successful person, but now he live in Himalaya. So I want to start with Professor Donalds. Sir, how do you want to introduce today's session specifically on climate change?
Well, my background is sociology, and I don't think that but I do read, Science and Nature every week, and nature, climate change, and things like that. So I know 100% that global warming is happening and climate change is happening. I think the thing that I'm most interested in personally is the resistance to people believing it and making the kind of changes that they need to make. Right now, we've gotten to a point where there's irreversible issues. So some of there was an iceberg that just broke off of Antarctica the size of Rhode Island not long ago, and it's heading towards one of the small islands, Georgia, I think, in the South Pacific. It's bigger than the island that it's about to run into. And that's going to be happening more and more. We can see cracks in Antarctica. So that's just an example of one of the things that's going on. And all the ice, that's water that's been above sea level. So in the North Pole, when the water melts, it's sort of like ice cubes melting in a glass. It doesn't raise the sea level to any extent, but Antarctica is raising the sea level. I'm mentioning that as just one of many things that's going on: the forest fires, droughts, and as a society, on the internet, as a society and a world, the most important thing we've got to do, one of the things we have to do now is, besides trying to reduce the greenhouse gases that are causing the global warming, is to start mitigating issues and the problems that are going to be taking place. On my phone thinks I'm giving it orders. It's trying to respond to me, so I have to shut the stupid thing off. Okay. And I was looking around. There's a United Nations, part of the United Nations, a teeny part, that works on entrepreneurship and trying to promote entrepreneurship for climate change issues. So it gives examples of various things that people are doing, like turning bamboo into coal or into carbon for carbon being use. We need carbon for various kinds of things. I mean, the example, people are using phones to be able to let each other know what's going on. But the issue is Um, you in countries like Bangladesh and even many places in the United States, the southern United States, Houston, New Orleans, places like that, there are whole areas that are not going to, people aren't going to be able to live, and it's happening already. People are like kind of they're in denial. They keep going back to Houston and New Orleans and rebuilding it, and then a couple of years later it gets wiped out again. And I think eventually people are going to realize that it's not going to work. But where are those? How can we mitigate those things? How can we help people move? How can we help all the kinds of things that we need to do to make to mitigation? It's like, since it's going to happen, what are we going to do to be able to live and survive in the world that we're creating? And without people believing that, in a sense, without belief is action. So the way language works is that we know what things mean by what we do, and what's going on is people just don't have a way of changing what they do. So I think, well, that's what I work on, and that's what I study. And the answers that anyone has come up with is that we're all living in a narrative, the particular story we tell ourselves about the world. And if we tell people the facts about global warming, and we say, yes, global warming's happening, and we tell the people the facts about climate change, they just don't believe it, because because of cognitive dissonance. We look at something, and two people will look at the same thing and see entirely different things. And I think the biggest challenge is to be able to start acting in ways that will make a difference. And I strongly believe that entrepreneurs are the basis of what we're going to be able to do, because they take problems and ideas and turn them into actual things that we can use to make change in the world. And that's why that's why I'm part of an incubator. That's why I'm interested in doing those things and helping change the narrative. That's why I write. That's why I do what I do. So that's there. And I'm going to leave it at that. So I want to hear from the other people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think Akku Chaudhary, actually, he's just sharing his message. He's trying to get into these sessions, and he's a really, really very good climate activist. But because of internet connections, he cannot get in. But he is a very, very much interested about this session. So thank you, Mr. Akku Chaudhary. We will miss you. I'm sure you are observing today's sessions, and if you try even any point you join with us, we will really happy, because he has very good contribution for developing economy. Anyway, we have our very special guest, Mr. Cart. I directly want to go to him. He has a very interesting contribution in technology. He's a very good blogger, and he is actually taking challenge, especially the youth community, those who are observing today's sessions. I'm sure many of the youth community, they will observe today's sessions. Do not be frustrated. Learn from Mr. Cart. Learn from the today's mentors, like how he contributing for his life. This is the importance, and we believe the talent is everywhere. So I want to give a chance to Mr. Cart. We want to know your story.
Yeah.
I know that, yes, like how you actually contributing for technology.
Well, first I'd like to apologize for my surroundings. I'm relegated to a bed because of back pain. I was a science teacher, and for years, you had to, sixth grade, I taught sixth grade science. And so you teach them about all the biomes, about their favorite animals. And then in seventh and eighth grade, you have to start to teach them that climate change is destroying them and destroying habitat, and it threatens our very civilization. If you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have thought that we would have been doomed, that civilization would have been destined to collapse, because the challenge was so overwhelming at that point in time. Solar, wind, EVs, battery technology just wasn't there. In 2013, I had to stop teaching due to a back injury. And as I recovered from that back surgery, I pretty much focused on 3 or 4 websites, and one primarily, which is called cleantechnica.com. It bills itself as the #1 news source for clean technology. And it's really got just a tremendous amount of writers that contributed, very many experts. So I spent a good year, 2 years, just learning from those experts in the forum. You know, I was trained as a science teacher to know basically the basics of solar and wind and agriculture and all the different causes that lead to climate change. And it was this very abstract thing for most people, and there wasn't much we could do. And that's changed a great deal now. I was just reading this morning the cost of electric car batteries are down 89% in a decade. That has just been amazing. If you can just take a second and think about all the different personal devices that you use that have battery powered, how much better have they gotten? I'm on a 17-inch laptop right now that has an 8-hour battery life, and I just paid $369 for it. I couldn't even have dreamed of something like this when I was first studying climate change over 20 years ago in university. And that's what we're seeing with everything across the board with clean technology. It is just falling dramatically in price. So I kind of have a little niche within the climate change. I do want to talk about the problem. I don't want to understate the problem, but the solutions to the problem are coming online faster than we could have ever dreamed of. Only a few individuals predicted that batteries would drop 90% in a decade. And so what I really try to focus on in my advocacy is early adoption. Tesla hasn't even seen that we can bring in wind and solar and have that go to 100% pretty much wind, water, and solar power grid around the world. In some places it'll be a little bit different. The mixes will always be different, but the solar panels as well, since the 1970s, those have gone down over 400 times in price. And it's just the technological and the scientific community continues to find ways. If anybody's listening and they're interested in the solutions, there is one great site. If you just Google climate change drawdown, and there are over 100 different things that we need to tackle. There's a lot of things, but I would just really encourage anyone. It doesn't matter how small you start out. Once you're in with a network of people, you can start to make a difference.
Sorry, Dr. William.
Yes. How are you?
Yes, yes. I'm fine. So, yes.
Yes.
Yes, Dr. William, what do you want to add for today?
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to take a bit of a different tact today or approach to this, and that is to say, rather than describing the water, which is important, it's rather to kind of look forward with the new Biden administration and kind of what we're facing. And I say this by way of framework for this part. I think we can all agree that to a greater or lesser extent, probably to a greater extent, the United States has to take a leading role. We've talked at the 50,000 level of the appointment of John Kerry to lead the American foreign policy initiatives regarding climate change, rejoining the Paris peace treaties and things of that nature. But it seems to me at a fundamental level that in order for John Kerry to carry the kind of weight and legitimacy that naturally accrues to a presidential appointment, it has to be backed up by actions, deeds, and words here domestically in the United States. And on that point, I wanted to take a moment as we move into the new year and the impending installation of our new administration, just to outline for the world what we are doing domestically. You know, I had said on a previous show that, you know, show me somebody's budget and I'll tell you what his or her priorities and values are. And in that regard, what I want to point out is at least what we will see and we will know in the upcoming weeks that the Biden administration plan is, at least according to them, on day one, that they are going to issue a series of executive orders. These initial executive orders should be seen as the executive branch's down payment on their attempts to once again take the lead on to combat international climate change. In the first phase of this, with the executive orders, they are primarily going to be aimed at preventing further damage from all of Trump's executive actions and or the actions of his administrators directly involved with the environment, either through the Department of the Interior or the EPA and such. And so what we can expect to see is a series of executive orders that either halts and or reverses what the Trump administration had been engaged in over the previous 4 years. Now, that's just piece one. Piece two, and what I'm more excited about is this, because frankly, part of this is, and Alex, I just want to kind of mention this to you to see if it resonates, and that is a part of it seems to me that they're taking a page right out of the activist book, except this time it's with the full faith, credit, and money of the federal government. In that regard, what the Biden administration is intending, or what, at least in terms of what they've outlined. And I know this. I know that there's a disagreement on the progressive side of the Democratic Party, whether or not it's an endorsement of the Green New Deal, or whether or not his deal is as far as it goes, and the niceties around the edge. However, what I can point to is that initially they are talking about putting together a framework and proposing spending $1.7 trillion over the next 10 years to invest in clean energy and climate change mediation and mitigation efforts. Now, you take the 1.7 trillion of federal monies, and generally as a multiplier, you multiply it by 3 as the leverage value. And so you're talking about a $5 trillion once you take the public monies and leverage it with private dollars in terms of a number of areas. That's $5 trillion over the next 10 years. And to put that in context, because I know it sounds like a lot of gobbledygook and a whole bunch of money and all this other stuff. When the world's economy was shaken because of the American financial crisis in 2008, the big deal then, in order to save Wall Street and all of these toxic loans, we came up with the TARP program, the toxic asset repurchase program, or whatever they were calling it. We were just bailing out rich people. But that was the single biggest emergency financial package that the United States had put together as of that moment. And that was $800 billion. And we were shocked here in the United States. And this is merely 12 years ago. We were shocked. We couldn't understand the numbers. Now, you take the $1.7 trillion plan with the multiple of 3, and that's $5 trillion over 10 years. That is the equivalent to a $500 billion rescue plan every year for the next 10 years. And so if we were back in 2008, and when we were, and we said 800 billion as a one-shot deal to save our entire economy, then if I come to you now, if I said to you back then, how about $500 billion per year, each year, for the next 10 years, the world would have gone nuts. Absolutely crazy. But we find ourselves now 12 years later, thankfully with the new administration, where they are actually proposing this. And the best that we are arguing about here in the United States is not whether that 500 billion is too much or whether or not we can afford it. The question is, hey, is it enough? And so those are the debates and the niceties around the edges. But that's ripping a page out of the activist book, because with $500 billion per year, that is the equivalent back in 2008 of bailing out our entire economy every year for 10 years. And so I'm heartened by that. Now, secondarily, I want to point out that in addition to that, separately, the federal government under the Biden's proposal has been talking about, and they plan to implement the usage of their federal procurement system. And that's essentially this. You know, you go to your office manager who buys all of your paper clips, your pencils, the notepads, the computers, the computer jet inks, and all that stuff. Okay, that all costs money. For the federal government, that amounts to about $500 billion a year. That's a lot. And so what they are talking about is redirecting that federal procurement system to make it a priority that when they spend federal dollars, $500 billion a year, that they invest in those companies or buy from those companies that are engaging in sustainable projects or products that the federal government can use. So we've got 500 billion a year from the new investment. You got $500 billion in purchasing power that can shape the economy just from the federal government. That's $1 trillion a year that the Biden administration is planning to insert. On top of that, you then take into account all of our updating and maintenance of all of our federal and governmental installations across the globe. And that's everything with maintenance. Just think about your house. You know, whether you put in a cistern to collect water, rainwater, whether you put in solar panels, the entire federal government is about infrastructure in terms of buildings and where they work, is about to undergo a dramatic change because they're going to write into the regulations and say, hey, listen, when you're doing upkeep, maintenance, or improvements, or additions, or renovations, or whatever it is, we're going to be looking into these kinds of environmental friendly policies, IOC free things, the paint, the insulation, the smart renewable kinds of all of those technologies that are on the shelf that for so long our environmental warriors out there have been pushing and pressing and arguing for will now have the full face of the do-it-yourself home repair portion of the United States federal budget. So that's number 3. And then we start talking about these other things. 2 more things I just want to mention, and then I'm going to pass the baton. But first, the Biden administration, more importantly, is talking about investing in biofuels. And this is why that's important, because one, it weans us off the fossil fuels. Now, there's always been some debate about, well, you know, what are we going to do? I mean, is it really achievable? And they're back and forth on that. However, we don't know, and it's worth exploring. And so under their plans, as they outline it, they are allocating $400 million over the next 10 years to $400 billion over the next 10 years to invest in biodiversity research and development alone. And as we know, research and development alone spurs all kinds of spin-off industries and is the base incubator for the dynamic portion of our economy that leads to the private sector. And on this point, what they're talking about is they're finally making true and giving credence to the language and the phrase and the words that say, listen, it is between our economy and the environment is not either or, it is both and. And that's how they're doing it. Now, when you take the multiplier of 3 with 400 billion, that's another 1.2 trillion. And finally, what they are talking about is they are talking about setting aside over the next 10 years, making it an affirmative pledge of 30% more than we currently have, a goal, conservation of American land and water. And that is systematic. So you take 30% of all the waterways and the land that we currently have, and to set aside 30% of that for conservation for the future. Now, at the end of all this, what their plans are to stop the degradation that's gone on for the last 4 years and the retrenchment, hopefully try to get everything back to, well, first just to stop the damage, next to then turn our eyes toward the future and bring with that the real teeth of economic purchasing power through the procurement system, investment of the $1.7 trillion. So what you then have, you have 500 billion, that's a trillion, 400 billion, that's another 1.2 trillion. You're now talking real dollars, and real dollars in terms of American money. And that's all domestically. And once again, to put that in perspective from our conversation yesterday, the American healthcare system, we spend $4 trillion a year on our American healthcare system. And that is more than the 8 other largest economies in the world, with the exception of China. It goes the United States, China, and then the other 8 countries. And each one of them has an entire budget of less than $4 trillion. The Biden administration is now talking about, starting in year 1, adding a focused budgeted priorities through monies and actions here domestically of about $3 trillion. That says to me that we are on the precipice of fundamental change, because it's the kind of change that our environmental warriors have been arguing for and working for and trying to implement all these years, ever since Earth Day was first instituted back in the 1970s. And quite frankly, Alex, the United States government has heard you, because now they are treating the United States government like they are their local community. Where can we save? What am I buying? How am I spending my money? What am I doing to my houses or my buildings and structures? How am I repairing them? Where am I going to invest? Where are the jobs going to be? And can we do this and both, not either or. So I'm heartened. And even if I only get half of it, in year one, $2 trillion, trust me, our economy will be picking up again and a whole lot more will be done. Remember, we have at least vaccines in less than 12 months for a worldwide pandemic. And I don't know how much money was spent, but I can tell you this. We weren't really in that fight, the United States government. But when you start talking trillions of dollars over the next 10 years, and the United States government has joined the fight, that is going to give former Secretary of State John Kerry the wherewithal and the street cred out in the international scene to put real teeth behind this, because now we're suddenly serious. And I, for one, am hopeful. Sharif?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. William. We have our very energetic friend, Mr. Alex, and Alex has a lot of practical contributions as a climate activist. So can you share a few of your experience with our audience, as well as I think Dr. Williams share a lot of things about policy, which is very much important. I request all of our audience, especially for developing nations, even different universities, they can take it as a guidelines that how actually America move for the next level, especially with their climate change initiative. I think Trump administration, they will after this Trump administration, new administration come, and many strategy may change. I think Dr. William will give a lot of insight about this new strategy, but I want more like practical initiative of what Mr. Alex actually doing right now in California and other part of the world. So Mr. Alex, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So yes, I can give you some practical examples of some things that I have worked on and my colleagues. So Dr. William just had great information from the political aspect and the economic aspect of how we're going to solve climate change. Now, there's so many sectors throughout our society that we need to focus on, and we have a lot of work to do, like I've said before, in a short amount of time. So what's happening right now, we're seeing a lot of positive feedback loops happening around the world that are very detrimental, whether it's ecosystem collapsing, melting glacial ice caps, forest fires, releasing more carbon into the atmosphere. All of these things are spiraling out of control. So that's why we all have to work together. We have to learn from one another, continue our education, work towards solutions, and at the same time, like Donald mentioned, incorporate mitigation strategies and ways to avoid potential dangers and ways to respond to disasters. So what's happening right now are the disasters, the superstorms, the climate-related, weather-related anomalies, and all of the floods and the Superfund sites and meltdowns of reactors and everything. Scientists, climatologists, teachers, professors, geologists, they've been warning us about these things, about these dangers for decades. It's not like this is new information. It was just so difficult to get this information out to a larger audience. So scientists, geologists, climatologists, for instance, they're not media people. They're not activists. They're just like working on computer models and graphs and statistics, and they're in a different sector. So it was really difficult to get that information that was so important out to more people. And it also depends on where we spend our time and what we feel is important. So right now, what's happening in the world, some people say, oh, well, climate change is always happening. It's always like, yeah, there's always climate change. So because of man's impact on the earth, and because of us burning fossil fuels and destroying Earth's biosphere and cutting down trees and releasing carbon into the atmosphere, it's now happening much, much faster. Now, I don't have those statistics, but maybe hundreds of times faster, thousands, but probably like hundreds of thousands of times faster than it would naturally. And all of those things are starting to happen exponentially. So not only are we seeing more disasters, we're also seeing the consequences of climate change. So like forest fires are getting bigger, they're happening more often, simultaneously. Same thing with hurricanes. They're larger, they're happening simultaneously, more frequently. Same things with floods, and we are going to see more droughts and food shortages and all of this because our climate is changing, and it's changing at a rate that's faster than we could adapt. So for instance, hurricanes, I think the other record, I used to have it, and it was like 9 named storms. And like this year, 2020, in the Atlantic, hurricanes or cyclonic activity approaching the southern or southeastern portion of the United States, that was 30 named storms. It's like out of control right now. So that's going to continue to cause devastating impact on the United States, the economy, and other economies around the world that are susceptible to hurricanes and other disasters. So what's happening right now is very scary. And the more you know about climate change, the climate emergency, it's very scary. But there is opportunity and there's hope, like William says. So, and it's like, we just can't give up. We have a lot of work to do. We can't give up. We have to continue to have these conversations. We have to keep implementing it in our daily life, how we vote with our money, how we vote politically, where we direct our funds. Trump really set us back. Whether you're a Trump supporter, you're not, he set us back so much with pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement, EPA regulations, and so many other things that he just destroyed. So he slowed down our potential progress, and now we're trying to get caught up with the Biden administration. So I do want to mention that there are a lot of Superfund sites and nuclear waste issues and everything else that hopefully the Biden administration does have to deal with, because there's a lot of dangerous things happening that are very time sensitive. The climate emergency has been time sensitive. So if we would have put money in it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it would have been way cheaper for us to solve if all of the countries started working together. Not just every like year, every month, every day that we don't solve climate change, it's costing more money. We're going to have to throw more money at it and more resources to solve it than if we just do it sooner. And that's why activism and education is so important. Whoever mentioned Drawdown, that's a great source of information, the book Drawdown. I've actually had a chance to see Paul Hawkins speak multiple times at UCSC College Bookshop Santa Cruz, possibly elsewhere, releasing the book. He has a nice book, hardcover. It has all of that information, but it's also listed for free on the website. So it does say, like, if you switch to electric car, if you go vegan, if you install solar, like the carbon emissions it's going to solve, it breaks things down, I think, into 100 categories. It really just shows what's causing climate change. So there is a lot of controversial stuff, and like, are driving cars really causing it, fossil fuels? But surprisingly, I think it's in the Drawdown book. I'm pretty sure that it says refrigerators and AC units are some of the largest things. You got to think, cars have ACs, houses, businesses, and the more AC that we use, not only is it using electricity, which is derived from fossil fuels, it's also dumping heat into the atmosphere off the opposite end of the AC. So it's really interesting. So I never use AC, and I try not to ever use ice and some of those things. So some practical things that I've done in my life as an activist. Now, I got a long list, and I'm just going to name a couple things real quick. 4 or 5 years ago, I was taking a walk in the forest, and I saw some tires off to the side, and I went down and investigated. There was a couple hundred tires. So I went through the county. I had a county worker come out. They're like, yeah, that's a lot of tires. And I said, I'll get volunteers together if you give me the big dumpster to, load them all up. So within like a few days, he called me up and he's like, I got the dumpster. He dropped it off. Within like 5 days. It was super fast. Social media, it went viral, requesting volunteers. I got 30 volunteers together and 5 sponsors. And within like 5 days from that point, we removed 1,000 tires from our redwood forest. It made it in the news, on the newspaper, this, that, all over social media. They were polluting our river. It was a nesting ground for rats and mosquitoes, pollution. So we got trucks and all these volunteers with ropes and chains and trucks. We loaded them up into this dumpster. So that was a project that I organized just by directing my time. There's different forms of information online. You can search wiki how to organize a beach cleanup, how to organize a trash cleanup. You want to be careful because we're in a pandemic, but there is still a lot of trash and problems to solve. So other forms of activism, I have held the sign, that says climate emergency. I've dressed up silly. I actually have climate emergency tattooed on my arm. I am constantly trying to talk about it, conversations like this. I wrote a book about the climate emergency. Any way that I could reach the most amount of people, because we need everyone to understand we're in a climate emergency. This is serious, and it's not just about the future generations of the world anymore. It's about the kids born today that are going to live in the world that we're creating, and the animals that are suffering. And there's a lot of ways that I tried throughout the last 2 decades to raise awareness of this, and thankfully our society is waking up. And it's I do feel like it's too little too late, but I'm not going to give up, and I am still hopeful, and I'm just trying my best every
Mhm,
day. And
mhm.
that's
Yes,
where I'm at with
thank
my
you. Thank
activism.
you. One point I just want to share with our youth, because there are many youth
Right.
already, they are joining and they are commenting, they are really enjoying your sessions and today's discussions. I just request, try to be like Mr. Alex, Mr. Kurtz, and I request all of the intellectual people, try to be like Professor Donalds and Dr. Williams. Like if we want to change our society, if we want to take some initiative, we need to take some initiative like Mr. Alex as well as Mr. Cart. Mr. Cart is a very good example, very positive example for us. Even if from his position, he can take initiative. Even Alex, he has also a lot of challenges. He doing lot of work for the homeless people, for his society, for his community. So I'm sure the youth community, those who are joining, Taharina, Labib, Nasir, Humaira, Shahrukh, Tawheed, everybody, you can change your society. Try to get some guideline from today's sessions, how they work, follow their activities, try to learn from their activities. I want to request, even Cart is a big example for all of our audience, like how he contributing with his intellectual activities. So this is very important, and definitely I request all of the like intellectual society, those who are collaborating with World Talent Economy forums, I request that we have a very strong like intellectual community, like Dr. William, Professor Donalds, and many interesting peoples, and many knowledgeable person from around the world. So anything we can contribute for your country, contribute for your community, definitely World Talent Economy Forum, with our team we will solve the problem. And I'm sure those who joining today's session and those who join in World Talent Economy Forum, they join World Talent Economy Forum, they love people, they love to do something, they love to contribute for the peoples. And every day we are getting call from around the world, from Africa, from Asia Pacific, even from Europe, even from Canada, that they want to work with us. I'm really, really happy that those who have specific problem, you can email us, and I'm sure if you want any kind of mentorship or anything, our mentors will help you. So Mr. Cart, like, I love to learn more from you, and I believe that you are part of World Talent Economy Forums, and you are a very good example. Like, what's the technological advantage we will get next 10 years or next few years, and what the idea you want to share with us?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was right where I left off. Pardon me if my interconnect connection is not good. One of the technologies that I find most encouraging is what we're doing with agriculture. I spend part of the year in Thailand, and in Thailand, to get 3 harvests of rice, they do a lot of burning, and it is just painful to breathe when they're doing all that burning. One of the new technologies coming online is they are able now to grow rice with seawater in deserts. So maybe we could move some of the rice production out of these beautiful areas like Malaysia and Thailand, where these just beautiful rainforests that can be soaking up carbon. We might be able to move some of the production of rice from that. That's going to be a challenge because there's money involved, but where there's a will, there's a way. And then the other thing is we grow enough food on this planet to feed 11 billion people, but we take half that food and feed it to animals. And that is really, really inefficient. Um, I said my niche is early adoption. I think it is so important to be out there buying whatever meat and dairy substitutes you can buy. I'm not telling everyone to go vegan or vegetarian, but if you can, a couple times a week, um, be an early adopter of these products, the price it's rapidly falling, just as fast as we're seeing solar and batteries
Mhm.
fall in price. I'm looking at projections for 2030 that we could have a combination of what we call clean meat, which is grown um, you're not having to birth an animal and torture it and then kill it for the meat. We can grow the tissues, and so we're calling that clean meat. And then you can mix that with some of the plant-based substitute, and you can't tell the difference. The stuff is coming online. It already tastes really good. I've tasted many things that I can't distinguish if they're in a particular dish. Yeah, you can't get a fake steak that tastes like a steak, but a hamburger, something in a taco, or something in a bigger dish where it's mixed in, it's already tastes fantastic. So if you can get out, there's the Meatless Monday movement, which is just we have to get our foot in the door on these things, and you know it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. My wife comes from a Buddhist culture. It's very much about the middle path. If you can get in now and be part of that early adoption and help these technologies grow, even if it's only a couple times a week, in 10 years, this stuff is going to be healthier, it's going to be cheaper, and it's going to taste indistinguishable from real meat. And that is just that is the easiest thing to get in. And we don't have to get the whole world to all go vegan. I try to work with the vegan community. Sometimes I think they're overzealous, but there are just millions and millions of people, billions of people trying these plant-based alternatives, and then the clean meat is coming online too. So it's just a wonderful opportunity. It's a way to get involved. It's a way to get out and meet new people, try new food, connect with them. One of my favorite things to do is to pull in a friend or a family member and be like, "Hey, did you notice that wasn't real meat?" And they're like, "You're kidding me." And so, with that, and I was talking about electric vehicles earlier. The reason why I talk about electric vehicles so much is because that's going to drop the price of batteries, and batteries is the keystone. We've got solar works during the day, wind tends to work better at night. So there's that beautiful match of the two, and you can spread them all out. You can overbuild them. The thing that's been the scariest is would energy come online, or energy storage, and it looks like that's coming online. So we've got agriculture coming online. We've got the energy coming online. Dr. William, I saved all the politics for him. He went through that perfectly. I'm focused on the technology, so I'm really glad to be. This panel is just like we're all kind of bringing everything in. I had to give up on the politics for a while. I had climate change depression, and so I had to go out and find, it can't be an all or nothing. Like I said, it's find that middle path. So for me, I'm real focused on a few specific things. So I think it's good to have a broad view, have your political view, your civic duty in that, but don't let that be your only thing. Get out there and get involved in some things, whether it's like, you could say, oh, cleaning up a few tires doesn't change the world. Well, yeah, but now all those people are connected and they're doing different things. For me, one of the biggest things that I went to the huge climate march that was organized by 350.org. And the head of that is Bill McKibben. He's one of the most famous environmental advocates in the world. And so I went from reading this guy's books in college, finding his work, to all of a sudden, just a year and a half ago, he retweeted an article that I wrote about how, what I've been talking about, this just rapid decline in solar. The prices for all these things are coming down so fast that someone like me has to go in and write stories up on it, because there just aren't enough journalists covering it. And the reason why the journalists aren't covering it is because their advertisers don't want to hear it. And we're seeing the fossil fuel industry just collapse. Coal is just in a complete free fall. Natural gas is coming next. I think I did talk a little bit about this last time, but Tesla is worth over $600 billion. And now it's almost 2.5 times larger than ExxonMobil. You've got Apple that's worth well over $2 trillion. And Apple is going to get 100% renewable energy for everything that they do in the 2030s. And if you just got corporation after corporation stepping up because it's in their economic interest, plus they get the goodwill of being sustainable. And that's what people are demanding. And the greatest minds, they don't want to go work for the fossil fuel companies anymore, because those are going to be dead industries. The brightest and smartest, they want they want to do well. They want to make some money. They want to start a family. They want to be free from need and want. But more than anything now, they want to be involved in the solution that's going to save this planet, because there's no planet B to go to. We can go to Mars and explore it and have all kinds of fun and be inspired, but we're not going to find another planet anytime soon. And there's tremendous challenge, but just so much tremendous opportunity. And sorry if I'm sounding like a broken record, but I love Alex's story of the tire story, because it was something that he could get started on, and now he's on to so many other things, and his network is growing. And I've written many stories about the work that he's done, and those have exploded. We just raised nearly $5,000 to build micro tiny homes, and that's just been a wonderful project. And as I was writing those stories, some people came along and said, "Oh, this is a small story." I said, "No, it's not. No, it's not. People remember stories. It's really hard to remember statistics. I could throw a bunch of statistics. Now, don't get me wrong, statistics are extremely important, but the stories is what people remember and what gets them inspired. And so I hope everyone who's listening today is inspired and knowing that we can do this. I think biodiversity loss is just going to be tragic, but we will save civilization. We will prevent the most catastrophic climate change. There are things that we've done that are going to hurt us and perhaps are irreversible, but we might even find ways to reverse that. We don't want to get complacent with those, but there is no limit to human ingenuity, and it is growing so fast I can't keep up with it, and I'm so excited to get to watch it on a daily basis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Really, really interesting. Then definitely we will learn more from you, Dr. William.
Yeah, I only had 2 points that I wanted to use to augment what Kurt was saying, and that is, first of all, and not to be, the statistics person, but
I'm glad you are.
First, just so that our audience knows, because some of them are in fact motivated by money, which is fine. But Tesla is actually worth more than the top 5 other automotive companies combined. So you have one company that's worth the equivalent of GM or whatever they are, Toyota, Mercedes, whatever. You take all of them, you add them all up, and they're still worth less than Tesla right now. However, what Tesla has found, and what Kurt, you have pointed out, that the real challenge right now is the storage capacity for batteries, or for solar, for wind. It's our storage capacity, and that's the problem that they're running into. We've been able to figure out how to generate all this excess energy, not excess. Here I am. See, look, I'm already taking it for granted. But the point is that we do need the more efficient battery storage, the next level, or whatever level we want to get at, because once we do that, then we can more efficiently move off of the fossil fuels, because as you know, Kurt. So I just wanted to highlight that, because then I'd be like, Oprah Winfrey, you get a battery. You get a battery. You get a windmill. You get a windmill. So that's it.
Yeah, we just had a new company come online called QuantumScape, and they're doing a solid state battery, and they're hoping to have that come out around 2024, 2025. And that company, I almost invested in it. I'm sorry I missed it, but it is now worth almost $40 billion. It's worth more than Ford. It's worth more than GM, and it's not even producing batteries yet. It's 4 years down the road. That is how big the money is lining up behind these technologies. And don't get me wrong, I think we will get to some type of conscious capitalism. Eventually, we're going to have to completely redo capitalism, I think. But just the scientific technicians are buying us that time to find what our next world economic model will be to get towards full sustainability.
Thank you, Professor Donald. My questions to you. Yes, my questions to you, like, you have a plan for innovation lab and entrepreneurships. Every time we get a different kind of call from the developing nations, like country like India, country like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Indonesia, that what will be the best model for innovation lab? This is number one. And how it helps to solve these climate change issues and these things?
Okay, well, I would like to talk about that. I'd like to mention a couple of things about some of the things that the previous guests have said. First off, in the comments, I made links to Clean Technica, the blog that Kirk makes. I made a link to 360yale.edu, which has got a wonderful newsletter, which I get weekly, which is a roundup of things that have been going on with climate action of various sorts, both scientific things about problems and also things like the stuff Kirk is talking about, things that we're doing to solve or mitigate the problems. A wonderful blog about climate change that's scientific. It talks about the science of climate change and the latest discoveries that we've had. There was a time when people could argue that we didn't have proof that CO2 was creating heat, or trapping the heat. And eventually there was actually research that was done that shows that proves 100% that in the atmosphere it's trapping heat. And you'll get links to stuff like that if you subscribe to that. I put the link to Drawdown, which is very interesting, and we talked about that. I put a Nature article that evaluates some of the things about what different countries are doing. And right now, the United States is not the leader in renewable energy. We could be, but China is. And I'm very hopeful for what Dr. Williams said. But what Dr. Williams said is contingent on an election in the United States that's taking place in Georgia right now. If the Republicans win that election, then the budgets that we're hoping for won't pass. And so, unfortunately, and it's both. It's mixed bag. It's fortunate and unfortunate. Our president doesn't really have the power to allocate much money. Trump stole money from the military to build his wall and things like that. He could shuffle money around, but it's Congress that makes the budget. So I'm very hopeful, and I think I'm going to get to that in a second. But Kirk mentioned capitalism, and that's where I'm going with innovation. I think we keep focusing on the United States, and the United States is really not a very good model for a lot of things. I am not nationalists. I encounter nationalists who are on about how the United States is special and it's better than anybody else, but it's actually very low in a lot of things. It's low in education. It's low in lifespan. It's decreasing lifespan. It's higher in infant mortality than most of the developed world. It's higher in maternal mortality. And we can just go down the line of things in the United States that we say, well, we don't really want to copy that. Our medical system's chaos. And so I keep pointing to countries like Finland, where they do have a reasonable type of capitalism. They actually tax the rich a lot more than the poor. They create safety nets. And getting to entrepreneurship and innovation, can be a tremendous advantage, because in the United States, we have this system where people's medical care is provided by their organizations that they work for. And in some ways, that binds people to the organization. They can't quit. So it's a kind of slavery in a way. And in countries like Finland and Norway and places like that, Finland often gets prizes for being the most innovative country. If they quit their job and start a company, they do have support, and that's something I want to get to a little bit. I want to ask, and don't really answer right this minute, but the biofuel production has been at least the way it is in the United States and even in the Amazon basin, there's been some issues with the biofuel actually lowering the food supply. If we have enough food and ways of doing agriculture, I'm sure that'll all work out. But there has been destruction in the Amazon forest in order to create food and biofuels and things like that, financial reasons. That's an interesting talk. And I want to really encourage the thing about networks, because that's what I study and write about in sociology, that everything that you know, every resource that you get, all comes from other people. There is nothing in life that doesn't come from other people. Power, fame, the food you eat, even the air you breathe has to be collaborative, because if some company just decides they don't give a whatever about other people, if we measure the success of a country or we measure the success of a company only in terms of money, then it's going to be very possible that a company will make more money by not cleaning up their waste. And if that happens, then they're hurting the people around them. So we have to have ways of, which we do in the United States, and other countries are working a lot too, because China, the air was getting unbreathable in their major cities, and they've been trying to clean that up because it was creating social unrest. It was so in any event, there's even the air we breathe has to be a collaborative effort. And so what I want to say, and what this last link is, it's on entrepreneurs. And to be entrepreneurs, reflexively, some people think of them as businesses. And so an entrepreneur could be a quote bad thing, unquote, because they're capitalists going out trying to make money. But Elon Musk is an entrepreneur, and we know that Tesla has been contributing a lot to solving the problems that we have. And there are social entrepreneurs. Sharif is a social entrepreneur. He's starting an organization for the purpose of making positive change in the world. So being an entrepreneur is somebody that takes a problem and comes up with a solution to it. And usually they have to make money in order to sustain what they're doing. It's not possible for somebody that even if they're rich for some reason, they inherited money or something like that, it still takes money to do it. And so entrepreneurs have to keep in mind the idea that they successfully have to make money. So there's a couple of aspects to it, which is that they do need to make money, but in order to they do need to make money, but they can also decide what it is that they're going to do, or do things in a positive way that actually make a positive difference for things. So in the thing of making money, innovation is basically borrowing something from one social world and applying it into another social world. And there's been research, like they looked at took a big Ford Motor Company plant, and I can give you a link to this paper. And the researcher looked at the place where there was the most innovation in the company, like the most changes that actually got incorporated into their product that were innovative changes. And they discovered there was one person who was super networked into the whole company. And he would use the networking ideas. In a big company, people get disconnected. So one area of the company would have a problem that other areas of the company just actually didn't know about. But oftentimes they had solutions already and so what would happen is that he would find these solutions that already existed and incorporate them into the area where he was working. And that was what basically really helped with innovation. There's a wonderful book called How Breakthroughs Happen by my friend Andrew Hargett that discusses that. And some of the papers I've written talk about that too. And so the importance of networks is there. But another thing that has to happen to start a successful company is you need resources. And resources are usually money. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money, because one of the most successful programs in the world was in Bangladesh, where they made microloans to women. And because of that, they all started very small businesses that allowed them to be financially independent. And because of that, it changed the whole kind of structure of how men and women related to each other. It improved, it lowered fertility rates. It did a lot of incredibly positive things. So the whole core of being an entrepreneur is, as I said, taking a problem and solving it, but it also has to be sustainable. So the last link that I have here is, the one from Nature is verified or talks about what I was talking about from China being the largest producer and the largest commitment to renewable energy. The last link is a number of organizations in the world that support entrepreneurs financially, that are trying to create new businesses that make a difference for the environment. And there's some from the United Nations, there's some from nonprofits, NGOs, there's different countries also have organizations that help. And it's an example of some women entrepreneurs that use those resources to create businesses that are making a good, big difference in the sustainability of the world. And so I want to close what I'm saying by kind of echoing a little bit about what Alex is doing and praise that, because ultimately we have to pressure our governments. At one time, the United States was really helpful with foreign aid. And even in the world right now, if you ask people in the United States, they think that helping other countries with foreign aid is actually a good thing. And the United States is very rich and has the ability to do what it's talking about in this, helping entrepreneurs that are creating solutions, both social entrepreneurs and capitalist entrepreneurs. They're able to create solutions for the problems that we have. And right now, the United States has gone through a period of extreme nationalism, right-wing nationalists, and there's still a lot of them in the United States. So it's definitely an issue and a problem. And the more we educate the people, and it's not just a matter of education. They live in a different world with different media sources, and they honestly don't realize or know that these problems exist because they're told, go to Gateway Pundit and look at it. So that's the giant source of their information. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you.
Pressure your governments.
Thank you.
Vote.
Thank you, Dr. William. I think Dr. William want to add some points. Yes.
Yeah, I know that here we value just some basic things, and I'd like us to kind of agree on the facts, and that is the following. I mean, there is a school of thought that reflects the views that Professor Donald has, but that is not a real school of thought here in the United States. That there can be people that are proud here in the United States to be United States citizens who do not suffer from the the pitfalls that school of thought thinks. Now, I'm often concerned, and this is just a point of making sure that we have the facts correctly here when we start talking about who can and who cannot be the leader in terms of the world economy, for good, bad, or indifferent, better or worse. You know, we have the nation of Finland. Finland has the 42nd largest economy in the world. And you know what the total economy is? The total economy's value is $273 billion. We just passed the COVID relief package here in the United States of over $908 billion. That's 3 Finlands just for our immediate COVID relief package, with more to come out along the way. Now, in sheer economic dollars, right off the bat, you would need 3 Finlands every day just to do what we did in one fell swoop. So forget, I don't want our audience to succumb to this constant kind of American bashing. So I want to go through this stuff with Finland, because it's really just annoying. Finland, the 42nd economy, $273 billion. It has a total population of 5.5 million people. America has over 330 million people. Now, Finland's unemployment rate is a consistent 8.4%, and that's for people 24 years and older. Now, for the youth unemployment rate, which is defined for anybody under the age of 24 and below, their unemployment rate is a staggering 20.6%. In comparison to the United States, with far more people, 330 million versus 5 million, here in the United States, we have an unemployment rate of 6.9%, and we find that woefully lagging. And we are working to reduce that, because normally when our economy is healthy, we run at about 3%, even though Finland runs at 8.4% historically and statistically that way. Now, here in the United States, even our youth unemployment rate is 13.9%, which is significantly lower than the 20% that Finland has. Now, I'm going to say this, just as a matter of common sense. Those are the facts. You have a country that only has 5 million people, that has to manage all of their stuff. 5 million people, the total budget is 273 million. You're absolutely right. Smaller countries can do that faster. They can do it more nimbly. But smaller countries, that because they are more homogeneous and because they have limited problems, when you start talking about scalability, 5 million people cannot be scaled up to over 4 billion people, and therefore is not a realistic comparison of apples to apples when we start talking about the world problems. When we start talking about things of influencing and leading on climate change, when we start talking about containing the disasters regarding to the release of carbon in the world, there is no way, shape, and form that Finland can stand at the tip of the spear when we are fighting this environmental war. And with all due respect for Finland, I'm glad that they are having a wonderful time. I'm glad that they are doing everything else. But I'm not going to have Finland be held up as if they are on the same platform as the United States. The United States economy is $23 trillion versus 273 billion. Now, it seems to me that one of the ways that we would add to, in a constructive way to this conversation, is not to bash the people of goodwill in the United States, over 80 million of which just voted for Biden to lead this nation and then to lead the world. It seems to me to be more constructive, too. Say, hey, listen, how do we encourage the goodwill of the world's largest economy in that nation and get right-thinking people on the right path, rather than just, slamming them and saying everything sucks about the United States, or worse. If it sucks about the United States and everybody throws in their chips and gives up, trust me, the rest of the world goes down with it. We've just seen it. Whenever the American economy falters, the entire world economy falters. So really, for the sake of honest discussion, let's compare apples to apples. Go find another nation that has over 300 million people, and then let's start talking about how we can go about influencing the future direction that we need to go in. And quite frankly, it is also a bit disingenuous to, on the one hand, say that the world's largest economy in the world is somehow so flawed that it can't lead, but at the same time, that same nation has a moral obligation to give money. So you have in this one nation the ability to sustain for over 60 years of handing out money because we believe in being better neighbors to the rest of the world. So you can't take that, paint it all with one big fell swat, that insults all of us that are out here trying to do better. What I'd like us to do is I'd like us to focus in on this conversation, which is about climate change in the 21st century, and not constantly be looking backward. Tell me how much of Finland's economy are they committing to leading the war on climate change in the world? You tell me that. I've just told you, I've got $5 trillion that the United States government is putting on the line every year for the next 10 years. You tell me another country that's going to put that down, and then I'll start listening to them. But in the meantime, stop bashing the United States. It is annoying, and it misleads the developing nations out there. It really does.
Okay, thank you, Professor Donald. Yeah.
Well, what he said is completely irrelevant and has absolutely nothing to do with what I'm talking about. It's interesting to see this extreme nationalism, but there's no point when I talked about Finland leading the world. There's no point. I know perfectly well. I go to Finland and work with their innovation, and I work with their people all the time. And one of the points I make there is that the economy of Silicon Valley alone is 3 times the size of the economy of Finland. However, what I was addressing was what Kirk said about coming up with some sorts of reliable capitalism. In the United States right now, it's a fact that most of the money is owned by a very small number of people.
Sure.
And for most people, and that's increasing. So basically the amount of money that most of us have relative to the amount of money a certain number of people have. It's partially due to the financialization of the United States, which is that people can make money off of money, so they don't really even want to invest in businesses. And businesses are risky. If you can just make money on money, just go for it. So to pretend that the United States doesn't have problems, I think is disingenuous. There's no point when I insulted the 80 million people. I'm very, very pleased that happened. But what I'm concerned about is that the way that our system is set up, the 40 million people in California have 2 senators, and the however many, small number of people, probably less than the size, fewer than New York City, in Oklahoma also have 2 senators. And because of that, the areas like Texas, Oklahoma, and North Dakota that completely depend on oil are just rampantly doing whatever they can to stop any progress. Sadly, they're a lot more successful than we'd like them to be. My point was that we need to educate people, and as I pointed out, what Alex was doing, of having ways of trying to get people that aren't aware to become aware, to become part of our thing, was a valuable and wonderful way to go. And back to Finland, and I don't see why you couldn't have a tax structure in the United States that's more like Finland or Norway or Denmark or many other countries, more and more countries in the world, where very, very, very wealthy people, financializations, the super high-speed transactions that are taking place that basically just create money in Wall Street were taxed. The United States was taxed, the upper echelon in the United States was taxed 90% in the Eisenhower administration. But their taxes are going down and down and down. We talk about numbers. Basically there was a tax decrease that happened under Trump, of about $2 trillion, and raised our deficit, which is the difference between the amount of money we spend every year and the amount of money the government takes in every year. It tripled our deficit in just a couple of years. That's the kind of thing that we need to look. One of the things we need to look at Finland to. Another thing that we can look to Finland to, which is something that we can do. It doesn't have anything to do with the size of the economy or the size of the number of people that are there, is the ways that they manage their resources. As I've said before, they have sensors through all of their links to be able to understand if something's changed so that they can go and investigate why it is that there's a problem. They have a lot of lakes, and they also recycle heat from waste. They do that in Denmark. They do that in a lot of the Scandinavian countries where they have waste heat and they pipe it into the houses to heat the houses. I mean, those are all things that could be done in the United States. It could be done anywhere. That doesn't have anything to do with the size of the population or the size of the economy. The healthcare systems in most developed countries are far better than they are in the United States for the average person. I mean, Canadians love their healthcare system. It's people have, anybody that gets sick has the ability to get better, and the ability to get care. And if developing countries look to the United States for models in healthcare, they're looking in the wrong place. I'd like to, if they look at places like many of our senators and congressmen and people, there's news sources like Fox News and Breitbart and all these kinds of places that come out of the United States. And if you look to those for information and models for the developing world, they're better models. And that doesn't have anything to do with the size of the population or the wealth of the country. I think that it's possible. I think that it's generational. I think that the younger generation is a lot more hip to what the issues are, and I think that they don't have to change as much because they're, developing. Just like developing nations, they don't have to change as much. Older people get very conservative, nationalistic, other kinds of things that make it difficult for them to be able to actually observe place and find models in other places in the world, which is what we really all have to do.
Thank you. I think Dr. William want to add some points.
Yeah, I want to go through a couple of things. Today's program was about climate change and how do we move things through the future. Professor Donald's response just now said, "Oh well, America sucks with regard to healthcare, so we can't look to America." No, please, Professor Donald. So we can't look to America to model their healthcare system. Nobody was talking about that American healthcare system on this program. We were talking about how to lead with regard to climate change. So that's a misnomer. Number two, Professor Donald then went in to lament the notion that 40 million Californians are only represented by 2 senators, whereas people in Texas and Oklahoma or Wyoming and South Dakota or North Dakota, they get two senators at the same time. So it's disproportionately represented. And they said the world shouldn't be looking to the United States for it to replicate its political model. Fine, that may be great, that may be true, but that's not today's subject. Today's subject is climate change and the 21st century. Now, when it comes to this other notion, because this really discourages me, Finland has a population of 5.5 million people. That is less than the city of New York. That is New York City. That is one city. By definition, the United States is more populous and more diverse than Finland is and has way more people. And so it is, I'm telling you, you cannot have apples to apples when you put 5 million people, and then you say, well, you can't look at the United States because of the political system, because of the healthcare system, because of the way they run their capitalist system. But you can look at Finland for their how to run their climate system when you've said nothing derogatory about what the American policy is doing. At the beginning of this program, I just laid out the Biden administration's plan, which they are set to implement moving forward in about 20 days. In 20 days, it's a brand new world. Now, I do want to address this because it's fundamentally unfair when you have a think tank and you're engaging in ideas. We can disagree on ideas. Professor Donald's entirely within his right to go advocate for healthcare change in the United States, to go advocate for electoral college change, to advocate for the popular vote, to do all this other stuff. What he does not have a right to do is to turn around and dismiss anybody else's arguments based on the facts with a slur such as nationalism. because that is patently absurd. I personally find it offensive. It shows a slow lack of a total lack of intellectual engagement. Because, quite frankly, Professor Donald has attempted to, with one fell swoop, during the course of this conversation, to label me as a nationalist, as if that was bad. And, it is particularly, he said just a moment ago, the young people have a better handle on things. And I think that's true, Professor Donald, because I know that I am substantially younger than you. And here, let me tell you something about my America. My America, I descended from African-American slaves in my America. You descended from people that owned slaves in America. Now, for you to then turn around, well, I don't care, Professor Donald, because you can call me nationalistic with one fell swoop, thereby dismissing all of my stuff while you go on rants and raves about platitudes and your own judgment. That is intellectually unfair. It's a personal attack. It's the very thing that you hate and that you protest, but you're doing the same thing. That makes you an intellectual bully. I don't like it. You shouldn't do it. It sends the wrong message around the world. If you want to stick to an argument about ideas, I am all in. But you cannot do it by misleading people, by subterfuge, and then at the end of the day, as icing on the cake, just to turn around and call somebody a nationalist. Because being proud of your country is not being a nationalist. Being a nationalist has very specific historical definition. It includes Nazi. And that is patently absurd, Professor Donald. So why don't you stick to climate change, which is what this program is about? How are you going to move forward? Tell me how Finland's moving forward. Now, I think that Sharif ought to say something. But
wait a minute. I got what you're just yelling.
No, I'm not. Actually, I'm talking to the rest of the world.
Okay. Dr. William and Professor Donald, I need to stop both of you. I want to go to my two other guests, our guest, panelist, Mr. Alex and Mr. Cart. So what do you want to add? Because example, we want to add something about climate change. And what's your opinion on that particular point, Mr. Cart? First, Mr. Alex, then Mr. Cart. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to mention, Kurt was talking about the meats and the meat substitutes. And I wish we saw more. I just got some notes. I'm just going to cover some things that I heard from this conversation. I wish that there was more of a 30-70 mix of the meat and the plant-based products, or a 40-60. So then we had the option, or those that eat meat can eat a partial plant-based meat mix. And I think it would also help with our transition away from meats, because raising cattle, raising pigs and chickens and all that, it takes more energy, water, food, and resources than just growing the vegetables themselves. So there's a lot of good developments there. So I do want to mention that was brought up in this conversation. I was at my mom's house a few years ago, and I prepared some sort of it was when I was still eating a lot more meat than I do now. It was pulled pork or something, and it was a pulled pork sandwich. I was eating it, and it was super delicious. I loved it, and somehow it got brought up that it was jackfruit. I couldn't believe I was eating this, thinking it was meat the whole time, and it was jackfruit with barbecue sauce. It was just how closely it resembled meat was really impressive. So one last thing that Kurt did mention with the good with Apple and transitioning to sustainable products, or them being powered by renewables and all of that. So Apple is trying to install solar on some of their facilities. They're doing a lot of great things with that. But years ago, I don't know if it was 4 years or 5 years ago, I did some research online. Should I purchase a Samsung phone or an Apple phone? And I couldn't find anything Apple was doing good for the environment, but I did see a whole page on Samsung, all the good it was good PR, but all the good things they were doing for the environment and how they were helping all this. So I tried to vote with my money and make the decision to purchase Samsung over Apple. And we're going to see more people doing that in the future. So when a company or corporation or small business or whatever is doing more good things for the environment, I think more people are going to vote with their money. What are they spending their money on? What are they doing good? Are they planting trees? Are they using recycled material? Is all their electrical energy generated from renewable energies and all that? So in this conversation, I also want to mention storage, because knowing how to store the electricity that we're producing is important. So right now we're talking a lot about batteries. Unfortunately, batteries, I don't think we've dialed in how to recycle them correctly. So we're having all this waste, these chemicals that are eventually going to end up in our groundwater, or it's getting shipped to developing countries such as Ghana. They're picking through all of these things without the proper PPE, protective equipment, and it's toxic. So we need to find better ways to recycle batteries, and we're working towards that. But there's other storage methods. One way is they thought about spinning a wheel, and it slowly gains momentum, and then at nighttime, this huge wheel that maybe is iron or lead or something continues to spin, and then they get the energy back from it. So that's one thing. Dams, they're using dams around the world to store water at higher elevations. You've probably seen there's whole documentaries on this. It's really interesting how developing countries around the world have used these dams and water to transport it up to a higher location, and then when it comes down, it goes through the generators and generates electricity. Anyways, that's a whole nother topic. There is the new technology for lifting up bricks and stacking them at a higher location, and then that potential energy can be recaptured when they lower the bricks. Similar to hybrid or electric cars, when you brake, it captures that image from the braking system. So hydrogen is another really cool thing that we're going to start learning more about to capture or store energy for later use. So I do want to mention, since this is about climate change and our society, global society, different countries, we are obviously out of balance. We can see that because we're seeing pollution everywhere. Obviously, we're not picking up the pollution. We're not educated enough to know the damage pollution's causing, climate change. So our society's out of balance with where our priorities are, with where our education system is, with where our finances are, where our politics are. So now this topic offends a lot of people, and I'm just going to list it. So we're out of balance. It's just common sense. Like, we're not doing things right on Earth, and it's disrupting the Earth's biosphere. So now there's a balance in between what percentage of time you have in your day, the 1,440 minutes of every day that you should be doing. I personally like, going out in nature, educating myself in all of these things, and I have my own balance. But I've eliminated a lot of stuff on this list, so I have more time in my day. Now, this list I just wrote right now, I think this is a large distraction of people's time, whether it's in America or any other countries around the world. So I think we're out of balance. So I think too many people, and this is going to offend most of you, I think too many people are spending too much time on sports. Now, there's a place for sports, but there's also a percentage of your time in your life that should be invested in watching sports or playing sports. TV is also a huge consumer of people's time. It makes people brain dead, it dumbs down our society. It's distracting, and it's just mindless. But there's good TV and bad TV, so it depends on what you watch. Video games are another distraction. Again, this is just a percentage of what you're spending your time throughout the day. So if too many people spend too much time on sports, TV, video games, they're less educated in environmental science, nature, and solutions. So sports, TV, video games, collecting things that just sit on shelves that don't serve purposes. Church and religion, arts, pornography, social media, drama, and just overall distractions. Some people have their relationship, their family, their kids. So there's a lot of people throughout our society that's just spending too much time on the wrong subjects that's allowing us all to have this misinformation and all be at different levels, and why nobody even knew climate change existed, or hardly anybody, 5 or 10 years ago. So Fox News is a huge source of misinformation. It's a lot of shock jocks just making up news to try to get attention and spread misinformation and the political agenda or whatever. And that's a huge problem on the East Coast, and a lot of people that are getting misinformation. Anyone could try to correct me if I'm wrong. There's other news organizations that are not legitimate constantly going out and doing research as journalists should. It was mentioned with taxes. I do think the taxes in the United States are not, the wealthy should be taxed more, and it's continuing the divide between the rich and the poor. So that's something that has to be addressed. So I want to mention one project that's really impressive that me and my friends did, my friends and I did right at the beginning of this pandemic. So I've done all kinds of activism. One of my friends came up, Alex, I want to start some sort of office by the county building. It's like about climate information, and I want to do this, and how do I get started? And I said, okay, you're probably not going to get an office at the county building, but this is what you can do. We can legally set up a table downtown Santa Cruz, a table with a chair and some information. So I gave him this advice. I said, learn everything you can about climate change and solutions, get some brochures and pamphlets, and just sit downtown and have people come up to your table. So he started doing that. I think I joined him the first time, the third time, the seventh time. So he would be set up downtown, constantly educating people. So then I started getting excited about the project I told him about. We started getting more educational material, more brochures, more knowledge. And then we started buying stickers and little flyers and making our own stuff. We started getting volunteers, and it was so fun having people stop by our table, random conversations, educating people about climate solutions at our table right downtown Santa Cruz. We would have people all the time. There was never a moment where we could like stop for a second. People would always be at our table. So we'd go out there for 1 hour, 2 hours, sometimes 5 hours. So we expanded. We got a lot of volunteers. They would come down. We then got 2 tables. So we started incorporating the megaphone and chalk on the ground and more flyers and stickers. We got a video projector that we projected on the wall with loudspeakers, and we started getting bigger and bigger. At the very end, right before this pandemic started, we stayed in that location downtown Santa Cruz for 172 hours. We did not leave, bathroom break, food, but we camped out downtown Santa Cruz. There was like maybe 7 to 8 of us. People would bring us food. They'd bring us supplies. They'd congratulate us. They'd wake up, walk in to go to their business, like drinking coffee at 6 in the morning. Wait, you guys are still here? We got like this big tent, and we had tables and our sleeping bags, and sometimes 3-5 of us would sleep downtown Santa Cruz. So for 172 hours, we were there. Everybody knew about it. We wrote climate emergency with chalk on the ground. We had megaphones. We were disruptive. Now, stuff like that, people are remembering right now, the activism that we took. So it started out small. We learned as we went along, and we built on what was working, what was successful, and we reached a lot of people. No one could walk past where we were for those 5 or 7 days that we were down there, 172 hours, that didn't know what we were doing, because we had signs and billboards and everything. We just tried our best, and we would play movies at nighttime, and it was a really cool setup. I hope that's duplicated. Whether you start out with a small table, you do some chalk on the ground, you get some little flyers and stickers, get a megaphone and expand. It's dangerous during the pandemic, but maybe start planning it now, and as soon as the pandemic's over, go to a popular or public area and see how many people you can reach. So I'll end with that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cart. Definitely, we want more futuristic technology from you.
Yeah,
specifically on climate change.
I want to echo, with Alex about making sure that we recycle batteries. It's really difficult to collect all the small batteries, and that's going to be an immense challenge, for our personal devices. For the electric vehicles, thankfully, the battery is so big, there is just a huge economic incentive, and it looks like that technology is right on time and coming through. So a large battery pack in an EV or a Tesla Powerwall, those are going to be recycled. We're even going to be taking the batteries out of the EVs, and several successful pilot projects where they've taken the batteries out of the EVs. They've only got about 80% of capacity left after its economic life of the car is over. But the battery life is just going so much longer. Now, I'm not talking maybe you've got a cell phone that battery wears out, but the batteries for grid storage and for EVs is just, it's amazing how long they are lasting. So I think we'll be able to solve that. And the cost of batteries has come down so far now that the materials makes up the vast majority of the cost of the battery. It used to be getting that stuff and shipping it all over the world and producing it. So once we mine a certain amount of resources that we need for the batteries, we will start to recycle them for sure. But it is going to remain an immense challenge to collect all the small batteries, and that is something that we have to worry about. These things going into our soil and our water and our air. Um, Biofuels is a very interesting topic. It's a very nuanced topic. For sure, this transition to for transportation, that's all going to go electric, but it's a transition that's going to take several time. So if you've got somebody who's going to get 10, 15, 20 years out of their internal combustion engine, it is nice for them to have biofuels. We do have to be worried about how it affects the food supply. That's why the biofuels is moving more towards algae and switchgrass and other things that aren't food stocks. The whole making ethanol out of corn, unfortunately, that's going to kind of continue for a while because that process is set up. But thankfully, we're not going to see that go to scale. Um, Biofuels, I really don't see that being for robo taxis or EVs. I think everything is going to go very quickly as soon as we get autonomy to robo taxis. It is going to be a subscription model service. All your stores, all your restaurants, they're going to send a taxi to you for free, and people are going to be giving away perfectly good cars because it's just going to become so cheap for robo taxis. I hope when that's happened in the 2030 time frame. It could be delayed because of regulation. It'll yet to remain to be see what happens when we start to have a small number of deaths because of autonomous taxis, because there's 32,000 people that die every year in the United States from texters and drunk people. So that's going to be a difficult challenge. I think I've been surprised how much the U.S. is allowing it to go forward, and it's just it's because it's a no-brainer. Any country that does not move towards autonomous driving taxis is going to be at a severe economic disadvantage. There is a transition in that time. What do we do with all the auto workers who, we're going to go from making 100 million cars per year worldwide to a much smaller amount as people give up car ownership. I'm kind of jumping over the place. To jump back to biofuels, where we're really going to need it is with potentially and hydrogen to a degree. We're going to need biofuels and hydrogen for cargo ships. We're going to need them for planes. I don't think we're going to need hydrogen and biofuels for our cars or for our buses. There are always niches. If you look at Japan and some of the other island nations, they're going to need hydrogen. We're going to need hydrogen for steel making and other industrial processes. But by and large, it is going to be lithium ion is going to take us to 90% wind and solar and water. And, so the one little bit of nuance on the biofuels is it is a little bit of greenwashing how the Exxon Mobils are talking about it. They're kind of making it seem like it's a bigger solution than it is, but it is important. And early adopters, if you're coming in and you're buying biofuels, that's great because it's going to set up the industry that we need for shipping and for air travel. And there always will be some remote generators for backup. We're always going to need that to go along with our batteries and with the other storage. The gravity storage that Alex has talked about has been really interesting. I think it's definitely going to have more pilot projects. It's just kind of to see
It's hard to scale.
can it catch up that scale. But it's one of my favorite with the trains that go up and down too. But I think mostly the decrease in battery prices has just been so phenomenal. And what Tesla did with their battery day and just showing how they're going to completely revolutionize the mining industry and, more importantly, the supply chain, because you had stuff being mined in North America, shipped to China to be processed, sent back, and it was just this terrible waste and expense. So, I just want to say, I really appreciate the other panelists. I think it's good that we had a bit of a heated debate, but looking from the outside in, I think there were some labels that maybe weren't intended to be put on to each other. So I just really appreciate you guys, and I'm glad to learn from you, and appreciate the energy, and then, but also I think it's I get energetic and hopeful about it, but it's also it's a very serious issue and a very serious challenge, and I think we're going to tackle it, and I'm real hopeful. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Donald, there is
I want to say
specific.
that I just want to say when I was
Can
saying
you hear me?
national, yeah,
Yes.
can you hear
there
me?
is yes. Can
Go ahead.
everyone hear me clearly?
Mhm.
Okay. There are some specific questions from audience, especially on climate change. So we will discuss and we will give answer to the audience question. I think it will be better for today's discussions. There are few questions from audience. I think we should respect audience interest on our discussions. Bappi, his question is that how does climate change affect flora and fauna? Is there any scientific analysis or anything you want to give? You can give. Mohammad Siab, is it necessary to enhance the role of forest in adapting to climate change for every country? There are more questions for Dr. Williams and Alex and Mr. Cart. So, Professor Donald.
Well, first off, I just want to tell Dr. William that I wasn't referring to him. I was referring to the people that are, that are trying to close our borders and block immigrants and things like that. I wasn't referring to him. So, and I also have. The other thing I want to say is during my life, the United States has made some pretty serious mistakes. One of them was the Vietnam War. And during the Vietnam War, we used to say, my country, right or wrong. If it's right, let's keep it right. If it's wrong, let's make it right. So the size of Finland really doesn't have anything to do with it. And I mentioned quite a few things that they were doing for the environment. But then back to the question, which is, are they affecting flora and fauna? Yes. I mean, the crops that can be grown are moving north. If you look at Monsanto's website, Monsanto is the company that everybody loves to hate the most. And they actually have a huge thing on climate change and trying to talk about the bands where crops are grown, and that's moving north. Even in our area, there's things that are happening that are making the wine industry, that are hurting the wine industry, and that's pests that wouldn't have been able to live this far north. So pests are moving north of all different kinds, poisonous spiders, all kinds of things, and as well, there's some places where there's more desertification. There, deserts are happening. In California, it's kind of a big area of concern because we provide half the fruits and vegetables for the United States, but we count on water coming from the Sierras, and snow is a reservoir of water, and since it's warming and snow is going to a there's not as much snow, then it's hard to keep our water supply. And desalination is a great idea, but the Central Valley is 800 miles long and 200 miles wide. So I don't know if we can desalinate enough water to keep the crops going there. There is one of the solutions is to grow crops that are less water intensive and make the kind of changes Alex is talking about, where we actually become Alex and Kirk, where we actually consider what it is that we're doing and the impact of what we eat and so on our water supplies. But it's totally affecting the flora and fauna. there's talk now that Russia and Canada are going to become big food producers because the tundra is all melting, and as things move north, they're going to have better climate for crops. And areas in the United States, the southern United States, Alex talks about air conditioning being banned. Well, you can't live there now without air conditioning, and as the heat gets higher, that's a problem that we need to think about and address. Okay, so that's.
Thank you. Dr. William, I have a specific question from audience for you. What are innovative ways to adapt to climate change in poor communities of developing countries?
That is a very challenging question. And first, I think the way you go about looking at it is you have to begin by assessing what the current status of the country is, because you're going to have different solutions for different countries, developing countries. And so when you start to look at your country, you would naturally want to play to your strengths. And what that would mean is this: is that if your nation, say, is an island, then that would mean that you are probably you would be looking towards developing those resources that are fundamentally involved with aquaculture. And so that could be harnessing of the ocean waves. It could be dealing with sustainability with regard to marine life management. If you are in a landlocked country, then obviously issues of water conservation, depending on where you are in the world, are going to become significant. And you would be looking at maximizing your ability to conserve and deal and conscientiously manage those areas. If you are in a country that is tilted more towards scientific development and its technology, in those areas, your country should focus in on possibly being on the leading edge of investing in those cutting edge areas to solve the battery storage issue or to solve some of the other issues. I tend to agree with Kurt. I did raise biofuels at the beginning only because that's going to be one of the areas that at least the United States government moving forward is going to invest in terms of research and development. But just because the United States is doing it does not mean that those countries around the world that are technologically enhanced or are looking to invest in those areas as a country can't do the same thing. So, I mean, for example, recently, the Prime Minister Modi in India, and I believe it was just a few months back, declared that India was going to be the technological capital of the world. And so they were going to engage in a program in which they were going to train the citizens and make investments into entrepreneurial businesses and or government research programs that were going to advance and make the nation of India a hub. And that happens to pick up on that notion is the right notion, and because it unifies a number of different things. Dr. Sharif, it unifies your notion that talent can be found all across the globe. It unifies to that this notion that with remote collaboration across the globe, you can take the ideas from one country and you can import them into the other, so that developing nations can, for a much lower cost these days, invest in those technologies that Kurt is talking about and that Alex is talking about. So the developing countries and developing nations, on the one hand, there are some general 50,000-foot frameworks that can be established in terms of how to go about thinking about what you're doing in particular nations. But to drive down just to the next level would be playing to the individual nation's strengths, whether their strengths are in aquaculture or could be in aquaculture, whether or not it's in emerging technology, whether or not it is human capital talent intensive. India with 1.3 billion is human capital intensive, and harnessing that creative talent in and of itself would unleash creativity, which would spur a number of other developments. So developing nations or developing countries, you want to play to your strengths. You want to identify what you do have, and then with a nod towards just the other side of it, because it's a two-part thing. It's growing and building for the future, but it's also rethinking how we do things retrospectively to see if we can do them better, to conserve resources, so that, for example, moving rice production offshore to use seawater rather than valuable land, and replacing that harvested land with forest management is one idea, and I know that Kurt brought that up. There's the other idea, and it's a significant thing. It's the investment in trying to conserve land, particularly in the Amazon, which are the lungs of the world, and replanting those forests. It's also looking forward and trying to collaborate and cooperate and lead allies, the coalition of the willing, such as Canada, to preserve their forests rather than putting the emphasis or the economic incentive on them cutting down their forests as we lose forests around the rest of the world. So it's kind of like we have to save what we have, replace what we've used, and do it with smart technology. So invest in what we can moving forward, conserve what we already have, and look for ways that we can minimize our impact and change the ways that we retrospectively have been doing things. But nevertheless, it is still a hopeful prognosis, because at the end of the day, somebody can wake up tomorrow and invent something new, and then we'd all be laughing. You know?
Thank you. Mr. Alex.
Yes.
Taharina. Yes. I want to take specific questions because
Okay.
we have to finish this session, because there is a few questions from audience.
Right.
Taharina, her question is that which parameters should be taken into account to find out the effect of climate change of coastal ecosystem?
So when it comes to coastal ecosystems, I think having protected areas is very important, because then it allows the flora and the fauna and the aquatic life and everything in that region to thrive. We live, myself and Donald, we live in the Bay Area in Santa Cruz County, and I live in Scotts Valley, a little bit further inland. He's by the coast. So there's a lot of protected area. And I think that if we focus more of our attention towards protecting areas, not just coastal areas, but also having state parks and national parks and protected parks and sanctuaries, it allows the nature, and to answer that other question, the flora and the fauna to thrive. So there was another question that I saw up there related to the aquatic life and the impacts of climate change. And so with mammals, I've mentioned this in other episodes, they have the ability for their body's temperature to regulate. They're more adaptive when it comes to fluctuations in the temperatures, in the atmospheric temperatures. Unfortunately, aquatic life doesn't. So when we have nuclear reactors cool down and dumping all that hot water, when the oceans continue to increase in temperatures because of the sun, all of that's just throwing off aquatic life, because they only have a fluctuation of like 1 to 2 degrees. They're a lot more susceptible and not as resilient. So it's very concerning. Another impact of climate change has to do with like a positive feedback loop and the chemicals that we're using and the ocean acidity, and that's causing detrimental effects on the zooplankton and phytoplankton, and that's where we get a large percentage of our oxygen. So that's all really horrible. So I do want to mention with Donald, he was talking about these links, and that was put in the private chat area. So if Donald could also bring those links, I didn't see them on the main Facebook area. He mentioned it in his discussion. So I do want to say that just how William was explaining countries, that was exactly how I was going to explain it. So what country are you looking at? And he covered it from what strengths does that country have and what can they continue to progress in, and just focus on their strengths. I also looked at it with individual countries and what they can do, but looking at it from a different perspective, like what are your potential weaknesses and how you can improve. So some countries have different risks. So there's hurricanes, fires, droughts, potential for blizzards, floods, food shortages, water shortages, pollution. So if you live in an area that's prone to hurricanes or potentially prone to hurricanes in the future, then that's what you're going to try to mitigate the dangers and adapt towards. If you live in an area that used to be thriving and lush with forest and now you're transitioning into a drought, well, you got to start preparing for forest fires and fire mitigation. Some of the ways to do that are mechanical thinning. I'm not sure if I completely agree with or support controlled burns unless they're done appropriately. Mm-hmm. So I do want to mention, as the United States such a huge example around the world, and how Trump and the Trump administration set us back. The Biden team is taking office soon, and Biden is creating a really good team. Unlike the Trump administration, where he's like putting ex fossil fuel executives in like leading EPA positions or whatever the situation, the Biden administration is choosing really good, trusted experts in specific fields, and then he's just building a really good team. So it's cool that he's so knowledgeable of climate change and solutions, and he's just making good moral choices from everything that I've seen. So I think that Biden is putting together a really good team that could help us get caught up to where we're at and where we should be. Just to jump back to batteries real quick, when I went to Puerto Rico in the small island Viegas, they don't have any recycling, and they actually don't have anywhere to take the batteries. So people on that island, they actually used to collect the batteries, local people, and try to take them to the main island to be recycled. There's a lot of developing countries that don't have the ability to even recycle AA or AAA batteries. Before the pandemic, I would try to take my batteries to Best Buy. Libraries offer that service, dumps. So anytime we could take those small batteries and any electronics, cell phones, small battery, all of that to be recycled correctly is very important. So I do want to mention, there was a couple other important links. So with the biofuels, there is a lot of energy that goes into making biofuels. There's supportive information, controversial information regarding, is it really worth it? We got to grow this. We got to do all these different things to have the biofuels. So and when climate change continues to cause disruptions on the flora, then we need to think, how are we going to be more resilient? Is it something that we can recover from as easily? So there's I'm not so sure about biofuels. I know there are some generators and things that we're dependent on with biofuels, but I do think that more research needs to be done. There's also alcohol-based fuels that we can create by chemical reaction or burning process of our trash, and that would help solve a lot of the global pollution crisis. So I do think that some of our attention should be incorporated with alcohol-based fuels and not just ethanols, because you can run those in our existing vehicles, unlike the biofuels where you have to have some sort of vehicle retrofit, and not everyone's going to take those steps. I do like how William said that there's going to be some spin-offs. So even though we're investing all this money towards the biofuels, it's going to stimulate a lot of networking conversations, research and development. And then there's going to be a lot of sub-projects that are working towards unified solutions. Solar, I read an article that's now becoming more efficient. I think it was like 29 point something %. So solar is becoming a lot more efficient. So we're finding out solutions at an exponential rate. It's we have an exciting future. Again, we have a lot of work to do, and that's what I'd like to contribute.
Thank you. This is the last questions and the concluding questions, and I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. For Mr. Kurtz, what is the adverse impact of climate change on the aquatic system? Why are we so afraid from climate change?
I had the joy of getting to go to Australia for a university semester abroad program, and they told me, you're lucky that you're here to see the Great Barrier Reef, because unfortunately, due to the increased water temperature, we're losing coral reef at an astonishing rate. It's very sad what's happening to the biodiversity of the oceans. Jumping back real quick to the last question, what can the third world countries do? They're going to be lucky. In a lot of ways, they're going to be able to leapfrog the United States. They're going to get to have more microgrids. They're going to have more. There are certain projections where I'm seeing rooftop solar plus battery can be less than the cost of transmission of the power, than the cost, or in another word to say, the cost of the grid. So, India was mentioned, and Dr. Modi, or President Modi, was mentioned. 10 years ago, they were like, we're not going to do anything until America does something. And now the price has come down so much that they're like, we're going to do it because it's going to save us money. And because, the air pollution in the cities is just It's just horrendous. It's not safe. It's taking years off of people's life. So I'm really encouraged by what's going on in Asia and the developing world, because they're leapfrogging us. They've already leapfrogged us with mobile payments, for example. We're still using credit cards and cash here, and when I go to the developing world, I'm seeing everyone pay with their phone. So there's the same opportunity to leapfrog. One interesting experience I went to, my favorite trip when I live in Bangkok, is I went to a little coffee shop, and it said no plastic everywhere, and it was the busiest coffee shop I had seen. And for the first time you were there, if you took the no plastic pledge, he would give you a free cup of coffee or some ice cream. And then my wife and I sat down and we made nets for to go to the rivers and collect all the plastic that's coming into the river. And so we're starting to see, and then just a short time after that, they finally got a plastic ban on straws. So we've got to get our single-use plastics under control. That's kind of tangential to climate change, but the amount of plastic and the microplastics that we have going into the ocean is just horrendous. I try not to talk about it too much because I don't want people to get distracted from it, but there is some geoengineering that we're going to be studying. There's a rock called olivine, and this rock, when you crush it and can spread it in some coastal areas, it can actually sequester carbon. It's actually a process that we call chemical weathering, where that's where most of the carbon is locked up. It's locked up in rocks, and this is through a process of wind and water erosion. We had in the history of the Earth, when the Himalayas were pushed up, that pushed a bunch more of this rock up, and we had a drastic ice age because so much more carbon was being sequestered through the rock cycle when we talk about plate tectonics and this stuff moving around. So I don't want people to go out to the presses and talk about this, but I do talk about it with a select audience where we can crush down this rock and then we can put it on our beaches and then in the shallow shelves of the ocean. So we will have a chance to kind of draw back CO2 back down. Hopefully this will be something that would be very small and done over a very short or a very long timeline, and not something that we're going to do. We are definitely going to decarbonize on the economics, but there are ways to get the acidity of the ocean back down. And hopefully it's a very small measured project that we might have to do, as it's something that we're going to have to do to actually save the planet away from runaway climate change. But there will be ways to get the acidity of the ocean down, and it's just everything else. I keep talking about a plant-based diet that is going to be so crucial because it is the early based upon the economics of it, and it's just so hard to see where all this stuff is coming because it's all accelerating. The solutions are accelerating so fast, and we want to have this nice linear solutions to climate change, and it's not going to go like that. It's going to go like this. It's going to shoot straight up. All these different things. I don't want to use the third world anymore. The developing nations. Sorry, it's my old words that I need to get rid of. But I'm really hopeful for what the developing world can do. I spend a lot of time in Indochina, and the progress they are making is very heartening.
Thank you. It's really nice discussions, and we learn a lot about climate change, entrepreneurship, policy, technology. This is the things, and I request all of our youth community, those who are observing today's shows, and World Talent Economy Forums, with the help of Al Noor Academy and Asia Research and Development Institute, we are trying to reach as much as possible. And every day we are getting very good response. And thank you, Professor Donald, Dr. William, Mr. Alex, as well as Mr. Kurt, for supporting us, for collaborating with us, and continuously help us to develop different kind of programs. So we have another sessions like this week. Friday. Definitely today's panelists, I want to invite them. Definitely we're going to discuss on AI and robotics engineering, so we can come up with the different idea and solutions and point of views. Beside that, I think that it will be very effective for all of our youth community, and try to communicate with World Talent Economy Forums. We will help all of our youth community. This is our commitments. So thank you for joining today's sessions. It's really great session for us. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
See ya.